Have you ever thought about creating a chatbot application with Next.js, giving it a unique and stylish look similar to iOS messages? Well, you're in luck because that's exactly what we are going to build today. But before we get started, I want to mention that today's video is brought to you by spreading.ai. Have you ever thought sharing knowledge online could be easy as chatting with friends? Well, that's exactly what Spreading AI is all about. Your new go-to for creating online guides without the techie hassle. And guess what? It's not just easy, it's totally free. Imagine this, explaining techie stuff without the jargon, making it understandable for everyone. That's what Spreading AI does for you. Thanks to their smart AI helpers, you can switch between tech languages effortlessly. It's like having a friendly tech assistant by your side, ensuring your guides are crystal clear no matter your audience expertise. But there is more. Spreading AI lets you to collaborate with your friends in real time. Picture this, you and your buddies brainstorming together on a virtual whiteboard, making your guides even better. And to add touch of creativity, you can include things like pictures, videos, links, and tables to your guides. It's like crafting a storybook with colorful illustration, making learning both informative and fun. Whether you're a tech pro or just starting out, step into the world of hassle-free knowledge sharing with Spreading AI, where simplicity meets creativity. Alright, let's get started. First, let's create a Next.js application using the command npx create next app at the latest version. When prompted, select TypeScript and choose options for ESLint and Tailwind CSS. Make sure to deselect the source directory and app directory options. Once the setup is complete, we can begin working on this project. First, we'll focus on building the components for our app. Let's start with chat components. This component will display messages, allow users to send new messages, and include a reset button to clear the chat. To begin, we import some necessary dependencies. We bring in a message type from a specific file and grab some essential React components that we'll be using in this chat interface. These components include the input field where messages are typed, a loading spinner for when messages are being loaded, the individual chat messages display, and a button to reset the chat. Now, let's dive into the main part, the chat component. This is the core of our chat interface, defining how it should look and behave. The component accepts several properties: messages, loading, onSend, and onReset. At the top of the component, we have a reset button. Think of this like a clear chat history button. It's connected to the onReset function, so when clicked, it clears all the chat messages. Below the reset button, we map through all the messages. For each message, we create a chat message component. This allows us to display multiple messages on the screen. If the loading flag is set to true, indicating the new messages are being loaded, a loading spinner appears. This provides a visual cue that something is happening in the background. Finally, at the bottom, there is an input field where users can type their messages, and it's connected to the onSend function. So when a message is typed and sent, it triggers the function, displays that message in the chat. Now, let's move on to building the API. First, we import a message type from a file located at types. This type likely defines the structure of a message in your application. Additionally, we import something called OpenAI Stream from a file located at utils. Next, we define a constant called config. This is where we can set any configuration options for our API. Now, let's focus on the main part of the code, the handler function. This function takes a request object and returns a promise that resolves to response object. The request object likely contains data sent from a client, possibly through a web request. Inside the handler function, we are trying to extract an array of messages from the incoming request. These messages are expected to be the message type that we imported earlier. Then there is a loop that processes these messages. It calculates the total character count of these messages and ensures that it doesn't exceed a certain limit of 12,000 characters. If the limit is exceeded, the loop breaks, indicating that too many characters have been reached. The messages that fit within this character limit are stored in the messages to send array. After processing the messages, the code calls the OpenAI Stream function with the filtered messages. This function likely interacts with OpenAI services for the processing the messages or obtaining the additional data. Finally, the function returns a new response object likely containing the processed data from the OpenAI Stream function. If everything goes well, this response will be sent back to the client who made the initial request. However, if any error occurs during this process, the code catches those errors, logs them to the console, and returns a generic error message with a status code of 500 indicating an internal server error. Now, let's move on to the index.tsx file. Firstly, we import the components like chat, footer, and navbar from specific files in our project. These components likely define the structure and behavior of this chat, footer, section, and navigation bar respectively. Additionally, we import the message type, which indicates the format messages in the chat. Moving on to the home function, this is the main component that represents the homepage of our application. The component utilizes the useState hook to manage the state. We have states for messages, which holds the chat messages, and loading, a flag that indicates when new messages are being loaded. The component also utilizes the useRef hook to create a reference to a div element. This reference is used to scroll to the bottom to the chat when new messages are added. There is a handle send function responsible for sending messages. It updates the local state with the new message, triggers a loading state, makes a request to a server endpoint, processes the response, and updates the state with the assistant's reply. We have two use effect hooks as well. The first one scrolls to the bottom of the chat whenever the message state changes, ensuring that the latest message are always visible. The second one sets up an initial message from the assistant when the component is first mounted. In terms of rendering, the component uses the head component from Next.js to manage the document head. Then it structures the page with a navbar at the top, a chat component in the middle, and a footer at the bottom. The chat component receives properties such as messages, loading, handle send, and handle reset, which are functions and data states defined within this home component. The styling is done using Tailwind CSS classes, which makes the layout responsive and visually appealing. And look at that, it looks incredible. And that's a piece. If you like this video, just hit the like button and consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.